Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're tackling something pretty significant. It's a single source, but wow, does it pack a punch?
It really does. It's basically a blueprint, right? For a proposed, well, a total transformation of the U.S. military. Culture, operations, the whole deal.
Yeah, it's an explicit call to kind of ditch the last few decades of thinking, get back to one single mission.
And that mission, stated very clearly, hinges on renaming the Department of Defense.
Right, the Department of War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that name change, it's not just symbolic. It's presented as the absolute key to understanding this whole vision.
The second you hear Department of War, you get it. The mission is warfighting, preparing for war, and preparing to win. That's the language used.
It is. The speaker frames the current situation as, well, decades of decay. Too many distractions.
Right. The argument presented is that defense sounds reactive, like you're waiting to be hit.
Whereas war is about actively preparing. It all ties into this idea of peace through strength.
And they even bring back, or propose bringing back, a motto for this new War Department.
They do. Those who long for peace must prepare for war.
Okay.
And the source is quick to point out this isn't new. It goes back to, 4th century Rome. George Washington used it too.
So the message is, this is a timeless truth, basically.
That's how it's framed, yes. Pacifism, in this view, is dismissed as naive and dangerous. Ignores history, ignores human nature, they say.
The only way to be truly secure is through, well, overwhelming strength.
Precisely. Which sets up this pretty dramatic cultural shift they're calling for.
Because if the only goal is winning wars decisively,
then anything else is a distraction. Anything not directly boosting lethality, it has to go.
and this is where we get into the critique of what the speaker explicitly calls the woke department.
Yes. The source is very direct here. Says the military got sidetracked by foolish and reckless politicians, made it focus on, quote, the wrong things.
So the first job is clearing the debris. That's the term used.
It is. Getting rid of all the political and ideological stuff that, in their view, doesn't help win wars.
And they list it out. I mean, specifically, things like social justice initiatives, politically correct, garbage is the word used.
Right. Immediate elimination of DEI offices, mandatory training they see as ideological.
Identity months, climate change worship, even mentions dudes in dresses. It's quite pointed.
Very. The underlying logic presented is straightforward. Personnel is policy.
Meaning if the culture's wrong, the force is wrong.
Exactly. So purging these elements is framed as step one to restoring a culture of pure competence and merit.
And that focus on merit leads to what I thought was maybe the most striking part of the whole thing, this new War Department golden rule.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it? It's designed as this ethical test for commanders.
The rule itself. Do unto your unit as you would have done unto your own child's unit.
Simple but powerful framing.
It really cuts through the noise, doesn't it? It asks a commander, okay, forget the regs for a second. Would you want your kid serving alongside? And they use examples like fat or unfit or undertrained troops.
Or leaders promoted for reasons other than pure merit.
Right. And the implied answer is obviously no.
Absolutely not. So it shifts it from abstract policy debates to, like you said, this deeply personal ethical accountability.
It basically says if you wouldn't accept that standard for your own child heading into combat, then you can't accept it for anyone else's child either. That culture needs to go now.
Which logically flows right into the next major section. The standards themselves, the physical standards, the performance standards.
It's two, yeah, the restoration of standards. And the language here is pretty stark. Ruthless, dispassionate, common sense.
And the number one priority directive under that. Reforming standards for combat jobs.
Yeah.
Every single requirement for every combat MOS.
That is military occupational specialty for listeners.
Right. Every one of those must return to the, quote, highest male standard only.
Now, they do clarify this, don't they? They insist it's meant as a gender-neutral standard. It just happens to be the highest male one.
That is the clarification offered, yes. The speaker says, look, if women can meet this very high single standard, excellent, that's the word used.
But if they can't?
If setting that high bar means some combat jobs don't have women qualifying, the source says, so be it.
Yeah.
The stated goal is maximum combat effectiveness, period. And they add that this standard will also weed out weak men.
So it's positioned as just a high bar for everyone, focused solely on capability.
That's the argument presented. And this focus on physical readiness, it's not just for the infantry, right?
No, absolutely not. It covers the entire joint force, private all the way up to four-star general.
So what are the specifics? What's changing?
It's a total overhaul, according to the source. Mandatory PT test twice a year. Mandatory height and weight standards checked twice a year.
No exceptions.
Seems like it. And it specifies real hard PT every duty day. Explicitly not things like hot yoga and stretching.
Okay, so a real culture shift back to intense physical training as a daily requirement.
Feels like it. And for combat arms units specifically, they're adding a new combat field test. Something like the Army's EPFA or the Marine Corps Combat Fitness Test.
So moving beyond just basic fitness to actual simulated combat tasks.
Yeah, testing battlefield readiness more directly.
Wow.
And this whole theme of restoring order through standards, it even drills down to appearance. Grooming.
The broken windows theory applied to the military.
Exactly. The idea being if you let small things slide, like grooming standards, long hair, beards outside of spec ops.
Which is the only exception mentioned for beards. Right?
Yeah.
Special forces.
Right. Only SF. Otherwise, if you let that slide, it signals a deeper problem, a lack of discipline.
So the era of superficial individual expression, as the source puts it, is over. Back to strict uniform appearance.
And that includes cracking down on, quote, rampant and ridiculous shaving profiles.
Okay, so strict enforcement across the board. Physical fitness, appearance, combat standards.
Which brings us to part 3. How does this new War Department actually operate? Leadership, training, promotions.
Right. And first up is redefining toxic leadership.
Which is a term we hear a lot. How does the source redefine it?
Well, the speaker argues the term's been misused. Weaponized and bastardized, I think was the phrase, used to stop leaders from demanding high standards.
So the new definition
is basically the opposite. Demanding high standards, that's good leadership. Real toxic leadership, according to this source, is promoting people based on things like quotas or identity characteristics instead of pure merit.
Okay. And to help commanders implement this, to sort of purge the softness they perceive, there are these 2 frameworks mentioned, the 1990 test and the E6 test.
Yeah, these are interesting. They're presented as tools for commanders to evaluate policies.
So the 1990 test, what's that?
It asks commanders to look at every single standard change made since 1990, every single one,
Okay.
and decide, was this change necessary for actual combat evolution, like cyber, drones, new tech, or was it just about, quote, softening, weakening, or gender-based pursuit of other priorities?
That's a pretty strong assumption built into the question, isn't it? That things likely went downhill after 1990.
It definitely implies a specific view of recent history, yeah, but it gives a clear directive. If it wasn't essential for modern combat, question it. Probably get rid of it.
And the other one, the E6 test, or O3 test.
That one's more tactical, maybe more practical day to day. It asks, does this new policy, this new requirement, whatever it is, does it actually help a staff sergeant, an E6?
Or a captain, an O3.
Right. Does it help them get back to basics? Does it make their job of leading troops and training easier? Or does it just add more complexity, more paperwork, more bureaucracy?
That sounds like a real push to empower lower-level leaders. Take power away from, maybe, the Pentagon bureaucracy.
That certainly seems to be the intent, and that ties into ending what the source calls the zero-defect command culture.
The fear of making mistakes.
Exactly. The speaker argues this fear makes officers play it safe. They execute not to lose instead of to win.
So how do they plan to fix that if officers are afraid of getting slammed for taking risks?
By overhauling the internal oversight systems, specifically the Inspector General, the IG, and the Military Equal Opportunity, or MEO, processes.
Whoa. But aren't those systems there to protect soldiers, especially lower-ranking ones? How do they justify changing that?
Well, the speech acknowledges they have a necessary function, but it claims they've been weaponized.
By whom?
By, quote, complainers, ideologues, and poor performers. The plan is to change the rules to stop frivolous complaints, anonymous complaints, repeat complaints.
Basically make it harder to challenge commanders.
The stated goal is to empower commanders and NCOs, to stop them from walking on eggshells so they can enforce standards without fearing constant bureaucratic challenges. It definitely shifts the power dynamic.
And we've already seen hints of this, maybe. The source notes that some senior officers have been fired, those seen as truly invested in the woke department.
Absolutely. The source even contrasts them with the kind of leaders wanted now. Names like Stockdale, Schwarzkopf, Patton come up.
So the message on promotions is clear.
Crystal clear. Colorblind. Gender-neutral merit, measured by one thing: can you prepare for and win wars?
And this whole philosophy extends right down to daily life, doesn't it? Training, specifically.
Oh, yeah. Big changes proposed there. Drastically reduce, quote, ridiculous mandatory training.
Less PowerPoint, basically.
That's the idea. Less time in classrooms clicking through slides, more time in the motor pool, on the range, doing hands-on, practical, lethality-focused training.
And this starts right at the beginning at basic training.
Yeah. The source says basic is being restored to being scary, tough, and disciplined.
Scary. That's an interesting word choice.
It is, and it gets more specific about drill sergeants. They're being empowered again to use, quote, tried and true methods to instill healthy fear.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, the source mentions things like shark attacks, tossing bunks, using strong language, and even says physical contact is okay as long as it's not reckless or illegal.
So a much harsher, more confrontational initial training environment.
The goal stated is forging warriors, not just defenders. It's a very different emphasis.
And the ultimate point of all this cultural change, all these standards, it comes down to lethality on the battlefield, right?
That's the final piece. Unleashing maximum lethality. The source says commanders will untie the hands of our warfighters.
Meaning?
No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. The goal is the ability to use overwhelming and punishing violence to win, quickly, decisively.
Without the political second-guessing that, according to this source, led to failures in the past.
Exactly. Which ties it all back to that historical argument they make.
The point that the U.S. hasn't really won a major war since the name changed to Department of Defense back in, what, 1947?
That's the assertion made. They hold up the first Gulf War as the exception that proves the rule.
Why the Gulf War?
Because, the argument goes, it was led by Vietnam veterans, leaders who understood limited objectives, overwhelming force, clear end states. They rejected mission creep.
So the whole shift is encapsulated in the name change. From a reactive defense department
to a proactive war department. One that, yes, maybe fights less often, fights more selectively on its own terms, but when it fights only to win.
And the source argues that true military strength comes from unity, lethality, physical power, not the other things they want to remove.
It's framed almost as a liberation. A liberation day for America's warriors is one phrase used.
Okay, so we've laid out this vision. The renaming, the cultural purge, the ruthless standards, the leadership changes, the training overhaul, all driving towards maximum lethality.
A complete reset based on this one source's perspective.
Which leaves us, and leaves you, the listener, with a pretty fundamental question, I think. We've talked about this absolute focus on physical capability, making it the primary measure for everyone, applying these tough standards, the Golden Rule, the 1990 test, the E6 test across the board.
Right.
So what happens then? What happens to the definition of capable when you're talking about modern war? War that's increasingly technological.
That's the tension, isn't it? The source demands this return to physical dominance, almost a Spartan ideal.
Right.
While also acknowledging the next war involves more drones, more AI, cyber warfare, faster information.
So does that intense physical standard always win out? Does physical dominance always beat, say, technical skill or cognitive ability when the fight is happening with computers or in the electromagnetic spectrum?
How do you balance the need for physical warriors with the need for cyber warriors, for drone operators, for strategists who might not meet that peak physical standard? That's the challenge this new War Department, if it comes to be, will have to figure out.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.